to Sinniva, ty poradzi sobie z midlane terem, Niebieska Gaming, bardzo dobry timing, losu kajtuje, ale no!
East chaos all over the map. Right, X7 are ahead of the play. Goodbye, Duel.
Now Shikari's in trouble. He's going to try and find his way out. Wait for the Shadow Surge! And the Rocky just goes wide, but a final auto secures it anyway.
Welcome to the opening day of the Amazon European Masters knockout stage. 8 teams remain to fight for the title and the eternal glory in their region for a first matchup between the LFL and LC champions, LDLC versus X7. I'm joined by Goldborg and Dino. Gentlemen, welcome to the studio. Goldberg, for you, we threw some cans of paint around, I see.
I love these colors. I could get used to this in the studios. I love European Masters. It's great being back for the event.
I think we all do. Dino, for you, it's your first time here. How are you feeling right now?
I also love European Masters. I think that's why I'm here. No, I'm just stoked. I want to get into it. I still feel like I should be at home with a cup of coffee watching the games, but now I'm here with these amazing people to look at it. I can't be more happy.
Yeah, because it's going to be cool. We already had a good portion of European Masters already. So let's take a look back at the main takeaways from the group stage, where the LFL got 3 of the 4 first seeds. And I mean, at Goldborg, Bifrost just kept surprising in Group C.
Yeah, I think LFL definitely a region we already know is very stacked at this point, but Bifrost to me really being that big outlier. Initially when they came into the tournament and they got into the play-in, so they had to play against Barca, I thought to myself, well, that's over for the NLC, we're only getting 1 seed. Then when they got into their group, I thought to myself, well, that's over for the NLC, we're only getting 1 seed. But they just kept exceeding my expectations. And now they were first in their group and they're looking really, really solid.
Not only that, the NLC in general, it's 100% going through it.
What can I say? You give us 2 seed, we'll make the most of it. Try and give us 3. Maybe, who knows? But it might happen something different.
Also very interesting about this, Dino, is the fact that we have 3 former champions coming through.
Yeah, and not only are 3 former champions, they also look pretty strong. I mean, they weren't maybe all of them pre-tournament favorites. I think K-Corp, in the fans' heart, they are always the favorite. But if you look at their track record in the LFL, it might have been their worst season there yet. But then they come to EU Masters and they suddenly awake. Like, they're online again. They are really scary again going into the knockouts. And the same goes for LDLC, the same goes for Ego Rogue. They might be able to take a title again.
Yeah, and I just feel like Ego Rogue's probably the champion or former champion coming into this event with the most pressure. Ultra League for a while haven't been as stacked as they were back then. So out of the names we just dropped here, definitely a dark horse in between them.
I think that's also crazy is the fact that we see a lot of play-ins teams coming through the knockout stage now as well, Dino.
It's crazy because all 4 of them made it, and that has never really happened before. It might be due to the seeding in the planes that only strong teams actually made it out. But if you just look at what happens in tournaments all across the world, but also like in every single region, apparently having a lot of games competitively on a patch is a benefit.
Yeah, and it's not only that, it's also just the fact that these official games are going to mean way more than scrim with. And as you said yourself, different tournaments, even different games like Valorant as well, we see these lower bracket runs.
Yeah.
They just continue to work for teams.
Do you think there is a team coming from planes that can,
So
take
to
it
me,
all the way?
I look at Vitality B as the little outlier. I know there's actually not a lot of people who's looking at Vitality also coming into the tournament because they're kind of known to choke it a little bit when the pressure comes through. But I think to me that they might be the one that people are not really looking at, but potentially should be.
Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Dino? Or is there...
Not only did Vitality B really impress, in the past, 6 teams from Plains made the finals. So it's not out of the world to think that a team from Plains can actually make the finals, but only once did a team actually win those finals. So in that regard, I do believe they might have a deep run, but we'll still have to see if they can actually win the entire thing.
Now, I do wonder, Goldberg, because essentially we're coming into the Amazon European Masters, people are like, yeah, that team just had a very lucky group. Do you feel like that again this year?
No, not at all. I feel like the groups are as balanced as they possibly could be. I mean, you even take a look at last year. I kind of said the same. I was like, wow, these groups, they're actually really balanced. Coming into this year, I kind of have to say the same thing again as well. Like, the groups get better. We have best of 5s in playoffs now as well. It's like, this event just keeps getting better.
Before we get to our first matchup, Dino and also Goldborg had looked at 3 players to watch for in the knockout stage.
Yeah, well, let's go for it. So me and Dino specifically, as I've dropped my microphone behind me as well, we got it, has actually looked at a few players as well that we would like you guys to keep an eye on as well. Players that haven't really been to the LEC yet, but players that we definitely think you should have a look at. And for me specifically, I had to start out with Bean. So a lot of you people might know Bean from the guy who had to sub in for Ops at at Worlds with Fnatic, but for a very long time, he's been a staple in the European regional leagues. Was the finalist last year as well when he was on Fnatic. This time around, they moved to the LVP, and his laning fundamentals, his way of being so reliant when you get into the mid to late game is just so damn good.
There's a lot to be said about this player in general, like the fact that he can, in any environment, pull out with the performances that he had. I mean, you go from the NLC to Worlds out of nowhere to the LVP, you keep performing to that level. It's really a crutch that Fnatic Team Kesso can fall upon. You always know that Bean will be a factor in the game that the enemy team has to play around, and in that regard, I'm really hoping for him to show a good tournament, because I think he's pretty much getting ready for that next step up.
Yeah, 100%. And when we are in the AD carry department, I feel like we have to move over to Locker as well. I know you, Dino specifically, has had a lot of praises for this guy.
Yeah, I think if you look at Locker, his career has been a bit shaky, maybe because in the Ultra League, I was always one of the best AD carries. If you would make a top 3 of Polish AD carries, it would be Locker, Odie, and then still Woolite probably. But then he went to the LFL. It was a bit so-and-so. When he came back to Ultra Liga last year and he played on Rogue, I think if you look at what he shows now and showed last year specifically on a roster of Rogue that didn't really do it that well in the tournament, he was the guy you were keeping his eye on. So if he can do it again this EU Master Knockout stage, he will have a very good season for himself.
And it's not only just on the normal AD carry champions as well, right? We see his versatility in the Champion Ocean becoming better and better as well. Likes of Seraph in Ultra Liga, but also the enchanters we've seen so far. It just seems like there's really no way to stop this guy in terms of the playstyle he can bring to a team. But let's have a look at the last one as well. It will be Yike. And Yike, for me specifically, was a jungler. Like 2 years ago, I made a tier list coming in as a caster to the Nordic scene. I was like, Yike, probably like C or D tier. I haven't seen all too much from him. But in that 2-year span, he's made it all the way to the LFL, and he's absolutely insane.
Yeah, it would be criminal not to talk about Yike right now. I mean, every team in the LFL is looking at this player on the LDLC roster and saying that he's one of the big reasons they are so strong. And it seems to come out of nowhere. I mean, in 2021 spring, he was 3rd in PG Nats. And you can say whatever you want about being 3rd in a minor region. But it was the year of Makers and Matchgo last year, so it was a pretty stacked league. And then everyone thought he's going to take a step back because he went to the LFL 2. But he didn't take a step back. He actually got Oplon out of LFL 2 into LFL 1, and now he's on LDLC.
Yeah, I mean, Yike, even on LDLC, man, the guy just gets so many resources, he gets so much trust, but obviously that's more you will be looking at when Yike will be facing NLC champions X7 in today's quarterfinal, a team who shuffled their way to the knockout stage on the back of the Emperor of Shurima.
What a banger we have to kick things off with here at the Amazon EU Masters knockout stage. A clash between the LFL and LC champions. And Goldberg, if I get this correctly, we've seen these two regions match up against each other, I think twice last year?
Yeah, we may have seen them clash a little bit. I feel like me specifically coming from the NLC, every time I take a look at the LFL, I'm looking at my rivals. That's really what this has become. Unfortunately, that rivalry haven't been going as well as I would have liked it to be, but absolutely crazy to me that already in the first stage of quarterfinals, we're watching the champions of LFL, we're watching the champions of NLC, and this could potentially as well just have been a finals. That's how stacked it is going into this match.
I kind of feel like these two teams, Dino, coming into the Amazon European Masters, these were the two teams to, watch out for. Maybe even say these were the two teams that are going to make it to finals.
Yeah, I mean, they were pretty big pre-tournament favorites. If you just look at the history of EU Masters by now, or just the past 2 years, LFL 3 times, they actually won it. So 3 out of 4 they have in the bag. And then last year, NLC suddenly stepped up. They made 2 finals back-to-back. So it's kind of sad maybe to see their first seeds duke it out already in quarters, because if the brackets were a bit different, they might have met each other in finals. But that just means that the winner of this game is a big favorite for the end.
It's only sad if we would lose, of course, which of course won't happen today.
Yeah, because if you're going to lose, it's going to happen against LDLC Olympic Lyonnais. I want to talk about this team because the LFL in general has always been like, this is the region to watch out for.
I mean, it definitely has. And I feel like for the longest time as well, you take a look at the players they get there as well, not only from LDLC, but let's hone in of that, of course. The way this team has come together with the members they have, like I think specifically Yike and Iker is 2 names that most people will be taking a look at coming in from what we've seen so far. Iker maybe more than the other just due to the fact that he's actually been showing up a lot on the LeBlancs. He's been soaking a lot of pressure and dealing extremely well with it as well. And all in all, just a well-rounded team.
And it's beautiful to see LDLC back, because everybody by now knows knows Carmine Corp. How can you not? But LDLC was that original big French org, and what they do better than any other team you almost see in the ERLs is they build teams with players. You can look at Aika. It's his 5th year on this roster. I mean, that guy by now is almost LDLC by himself, and they have Exakik, who's going into his 2nd, 3rd year with the roster. It's cool to see that an organization like LDLC, they just changed their top side. Suddenly they're first in the LFL again.
Yeah, I have to be a little bit critical on this is the fact that he made a little trip to NA, I think it was.
He's back,
but
he's back. He
Let's
forgot
take it
all
one.
about that.
They get one. Okay. Let's have a look at their opponents for tonight, which is going to be X7 Esports. And if there is someone who knows something about X7, it is our man in the middle. It's Goldborg.
What can I say? This is the team I've been following the most for the entirety of this season, and it's just so damn scary. It's built around a Korean duo coming in from the mid and jungle. Former world champion, of course, Haru does have a skin in the game, the Echelon. Don't know if you ever played with it, of course. And the way this team plays is just so well rounded out. They will get their leads through this mid to jungle, but it's the way they do it. They quite often just open up the mid lane, will put in a lot of resources, and then from there they'll start dictating where they want the rest of the map to fall. It's quite often playing towards that side lane, either towards the top side where Jaeger is either on a Kali, on a weak side where you play towards the bot side. And it's just the fact that, once again, they're just a well-oiled machinery. Nata quite often will just be an on-AD carry who's just chilling. When the time is right, that's where they will show up, and all of a sudden they're just taking over the game in team fights.
Yeah, Goldborg, you already touched upon a bit about this, but you know, it's always about Haru and Tempt in this lineup, because I was kind of wondering, which you answered to a certain extent, what the other 3 players are doing actually.
I mean, you can see that Nata kind of takes the weaker end of the draft. He has to serve himself basically in almost all the drafts, but when he gets the opportunity to carry, he can actually carry. And the scary thing about X7 is that they have tools and weapons in every lane, but they only get unlocked by one player, and that's Haru.
Yeah, exactly. We take a look at the jungle matchup. I feel like that is one of the matchups you just have to appreciate today, and really just coming in from 2 different members. Yike have a big challenge ahead of him. We've already talked a little bit about him in the segment we had just now. This is a jungler that's overcome a lot of expectations quite quickly in his career as well. But going up against Haru, that's an entire different champions. It's also a bit of 2 different playstyles coming into it. Haru, who's very much a facilitator around his lanes as well, but Yike, who can also be facilitated by his laners. I think the 2v2 between the mid and the jungle today is pivotal for this series.
I think in general, if I may say so, if you ever want a breakout season, it's this season for Yike, right? I mean, you go from LFL2 to LFL1 to EU Masters, face a former world champion that apparently is the engine that makes X7 run. If you now get him out of the jungle, if you completely gap him, I mean, everybody will be talking about Yike, and every team will be looking at this player.
It sounds familiar to a certain mid laner we had in the LEC this year, Astralis maybe. And talking about mid laners, I want to talk about this matchup as well. Aika versus Tempt, Goldborg.
I think it's kind of just a little bit of the same. Obviously, these are 2 more veteran players than what we maybe have coming in from Yike. Aika, once again, a player that lots of people has had question marks in from the past, especially what you just mentioned as well. Him going to North America, not finding the success, having to come back, having to live with the comments of, oh, he's a watch laner. He doesn't have the ability to face stronger mid laners, but he's been doing very well in the LFL. He's been stepping up as well in this group.
And it's not even easy in general. Like, if you look at the LFL, it's a stacked league. So if you can be the first one there, you're a strong player, and Aika definitely is a strong mid laner.
I am starting to get quite an idea of what you guys are expecting of this best of 5 series, but I'm just going to pop the question here. Dino, who are you predicting to take the win back, and with what score?
It was a tough nut to crack, definitely in the crowd I'm in right now, but I would say Allez-y La France and LDLC, they're going to win. They're going to win. I think it's pretty close, 60-40, but it's a 3-1 for LDLC.
Goldborg, you don't seem too happy about that one.
Listen here, okay? I got some guy from the Benelux who's barely got mainstream series experience, right? So X7, 3-2 for me. I have to go with them. They're looking so sharp.
Awesome. We're going to expect to see a lot of things happening on the Rift. You have got the handles to do it now. From now on, it is do or die as the Amazon European Masters knockout stage begins with a huge clash between the LFL and NLC champions. Casters, I'm a bit afraid to ask this, but who do you think is going to take it?
Well, there's a question, isn't it? Thank you so much, Coolin and crew. I'm
not replying to
Initialized.
that.
I am joined by my younger brother, Nymara, and a woman
That's me.
literally named Trouble. So please send help. Before we go any further, though, probably ought to answer that question.
I'm
How
not
are we
answering
thinking about it? Go on, Al. You're
Okay,
brave enough.
all right. So I think this is going to be an incredibly entertaining best of 5. I think that LDLC might struggle with X7's aggressive early games. I think X7 take this series, and I think it's going to be 3-1 to them.
Ooh, Trouble.
I am not giving prediction at
There
all.
you
When
go.
the
I
NLC
will make the prediction.
prediction.
So you now actually just have to take my prediction.
Is it?
You fall
No.
under my banner.
That's the whole Dash prediction now.
Okay,
That's
it's
it.
gonna be 3-0 LDLC.
Oh, traitor to the NLC. Love to hear it, though. Of course, this should be an incredibly exciting matchup. To both of these teams, right up there as potential frontrunners for the whole damn thing, meeting in the quarterfinals. Into the champion select, X7 over on that blue side, LDLC over on the red. Ari already through as that first map.
And that is just such a safe blind pick. There isn't really much that can answer it in a hard fashion. You can kind of look at stuff like LeBlanc, stuff like the Vega, which can soft answer that champion, but it's not really been enough for a lot of these teams, at least on this stage. What I'm interested in, though, is saying, okay, are you just going to 3-ban AD carries? We've seen that quite a lot. Nata, however, has played a lot more out of meta AD carries in terms of the misfortune, which has not been picked up by everyone across the tournament. I don't think you can get away with banning everything against X7 like that.
Yeah, and honestly, I really like the Ari ban for a particular reason right here, because two, it might actually force the LeBlanc ban to come through as well. And if you've looked at Aika's champion pool throughout the entirety of European Masters so far, in the group stage, Aika has played the LeBlanc, the Ari, and the Orianna. So I'm thinking here that maybe the thought process behind X7 is actually grabbing the LeBlanc themselves and maybe putting Aika on something that's more passive.
And in fairness, Tempt has been one of the most versatile players we've had over in the NLC. Of course, a couple other people who've put out a few more champions, perhaps, but Tempt is right up there as someone who's been willing to pull things like the Vladimir out, some other more unusual stuff. So maybe saying, okay, what have you got in this champion pool?
Okay, so that's talking about the unusual stuff. Got to talk about what's kind of shared between these two teams, though, because we've seen that both of the shared AD carries have gone between the Xayah and between the Zeri.
What a surprise.
Jinx was played, of course, a little bit by Nata in that group stage. Not picked up by X-Kick, though. Wasn't actually something that he played at that point. What I'm more interested, though, besides these AD carries, is now, well, what's going to happen between these junglers? Because you don't have the Job and you don't have the Volibear, who are two of the very best early game champions that these two play. Are we going to get towards something a little bit outside the comfort zones for either of these, or are we just going to go back to Yike's Viego, which he's been so consistent on?
Yeah, I was alluding to that. I think Yike has prioritized Viego over anything else in his champion pool. I feel like LDLC in general are a team that love kiting backwards and playing these team fights that way. So I think that Viego just fits perfectly, especially since you have the Aphelios right there. You allow people to run to you, you build a big fort around him, and then you have the Viego running in. But at this point, I'm thinking, if maybe you want to steal away the Jinx Zao from X7.
But this is the kind of problem which you were going to run into, because you could play the Aphelios and the Viego and say, yeah, dive into us, but you're already outranged by the Jinx. What happens if you get Tempt on a longer range champion in that mid lane? You're playing against double outrange for champions which no longer get to play against the enemy diving into them because they're still all the way over there on the other side of the screen. So I think the Xin Zhao, it kind of breaks that trend and says, look, at least we have some way to get back onto you.
Ooh, look it!
So this is something that has been raising in priority along something like Tempt Vex. It would make a lot of sense, a lot of dive, a lot of way to threaten even something like that Aphelios Xin Zhao, which has been pretty high priority across this tournament.
If you guys are not big NLC fans, Haru and Tempt used to run the Hecarim Vex a lot in the NLC, which is huge backline dive access, double fear. You can do the exact same thing with Nocturne, add the cherry on top that the entire map goes black, you can't see anything, and suddenly you're sitting there as an Aphelios, you've got a Nocturne on you, and a Vex.
Okay, but now you've got this Ornn here for LDLC, which is not the best early laning phase champion. If X7 do get towards something like, well, the Gwen's already banned away, but what happens if Jace comes through? What happens if something that can push in? And this is actually something which we've seen a lot through kind of the minor regions around the east end of the world, where you've got like your LGLs, your VCS, your PCS. They play global mid lane, or something that can follow from a long range, something like a Vex, TF, a Ryze, you have the Nocturne, and then you have something like a Camille or a Jace on top side, which means that top lane of the Ornn cannot survive dives. This is picked up from a couple of other regions. Seems like it's picking up a little bit of steam across the rest of the world.
Well, it also asks questions of LDLC in the sense that we have often, when we've been doing our research on this team, said, look, LDLC are a team that likes to play stable, safe early games, get to that mid game, and then basically use their excellent team fighting and excellent laning to win the games from there. Pulling out things we're saying, okay, we can dive from halfway across the map in a second or two, can really stress test that kind of style of play.
I wouldn't be surprised if right here, Ika's Orianna gets locked in. It provides great engage and disengage tools, a lot of zoning as well, especially since Nocturne and Vex are going to be diving into you essentially. A lot more protective layers onto the Aphelios, and then maybe allow DOS to counterpick the bot lane matchup so he can roam around together with Yike. They're going to choose to lock in the Rakan because I feel like Nocturne, Vex, and Rakan might have been a little bit too dangerous.
And quite good on that champion.
has a 100% win rate in 6 games.
He's been playing well on that season.
What's really interesting about what happened with X7's 2-3 here is because we said that first pick, okay, you're going for the outrange. Maybe you can't lock in the Viego on the other side because you're not going to be dive into them hard enough. But when they lock in that Jinx, they're like, can't we just dive now? Because that Viego's not locked in. So they've actually just gone straight towards and they kind of pivoted a little bit on that 2-3 from X7.
Ooh,
and now, this is actually something we normally see on the other side because Ragnar has been a heck of an Aatrox player. It's Jaeger who's on that side of that now. So we get to switch almost like the roles these two players have played in their teams. It does, however, fit this top side draft of push, dive, punish the Ornn.
I feel like Haru here has set up on every single lane, and thinking of Kasing and thinking of all the picks that you could go for right here, I'm thinking maybe even a Yumi could come through, stick it onto a Nocturne, stick it onto the Aatrox, and then you hammer that back line. I mean, he says meow himself, no?
How do you get away from that Nocturne?
You don't at that point. And actually, one of the other things for me is that how do you get away from that Aatrox? Because actually, this is something which LDLC have gone towards a bit. They're one of the shared champions, actually both of these supports are shared champions between both support players, but the Yumi, I think we saw that in the Kha'Zix game actually coming in from Yike, but you are looking at a number of carries where you do have the Yumi on top of them. It gets very, very difficult to play safely against them. And the problem is when you do start falling behind at that point, you can't stand under tower because you'll get dived. But if you're not standing under tower, you're losing too many resources and you're in a lose-lose situation. It becomes very difficult for LDLC if they fall behind the curve.
And of course, they have picked that Veigar as the last pick option, which is a pretty good option in some ways to split apart your divers. Try and put some gap between the members of the team so if people do dive, and then you can kind of keep the rest of the team away from them, you can try and blow them up. So I like the attempt here, and they've obviously got great team fighting here from LDLC, which is what they love to have anyway. My question to the both of you, though, is it going to be enough to survive the very heavy mid-game onslaught dive that X7 have got drafted for them here?
I think this is LDLC, top to bottom. They've drafted for them to be able to scale into the late game, have the Ornn, have the ornaments, you have the Veigar and the Aphelios AP and AD carry, and then you've got a huge array of champions around these two carries that will protect them, and you can kite backwards. This is literally A to Z LDLC, what they want to do. Play a little bit passive, and then play the teamfight stellarly.
But I also think this is actually quite typecast of how X7 play too, which is perfect. This is exactly the kind of game which can set up expectations for this series. Can X7 get ahead early enough? Ask me at the 10-minute mark whether I still think the compositions are working out the way they are. Because I think if you are right about how LDLC play and they protect their,
I've got a little note.
If they protect their lanes by 10 to 15 minutes, I think X7 will have run out of steam. But if you get ahead, you don't get to play defensively nearly so easily. X7 get 1 or 2 kills on the board, particularly on that top side of the map, and things fall apart.
The note has been made. I'll come and check on you at that 10-minute mark to see where we're at on that front. That said, I think you're right. This does look like a litmus test because both teams have got a style they're pretty happy playing towards here. You called out an LDLC favored prediction. Alex called out a fairly X7 favored prediction.
Biased.
Got to think about now, yeah, a little bit of bias, of course. We are the NLC casters, so there's a little bit of hope in here, despite the terror that is the LFL right now.
If OTP are allowed to get talked about their regional teams, we're allowed to do that a little bit for ourselves. Of course, that doesn't.
I don't know if you can get away with it being the official broadcast.
But there is a difference here, right? Where we have this familiarity with X7. The thing is, though, it's very hard to not be familiar with the LFL teams. They come in as juggernauts. They come in as a region, which Dino was saying on the desk. I've won 3 out of the last 4 competitions. You can't easily bet against them. Now, I think stylistically, this series should be an absolute cracker, and I do think X7 do have the quality to take it all the way against them, but they have to prove it, particularly in this Game 1, because if this fails for them, the rest of the best of 5 gets very, very difficult, because I think this is the kind of draft and this kind of setup which should be their bread and butter if they are going to win.
Okay. Want to talk a little bit here as well then, while we've got a moment to breathe, about Yike and Haru here, because Haru is on a champion that perhaps we haven't seen, I don't think we've seen him on at all yet this split, despite it being perhaps in the playstyle wheelhouse of X7. Got that Nocturne, it's not the Xin Zhao, it's not even something like a Lee Sin or aggressive things, but of course Yike on the other hand has got a very comfortable champion in the Xin Zhao, and both of these players have been so critical to how their teams want to play. Yes, in what's the word here? Association, we'll use that one for now, with mid laners and supports. But either way, they have been the focal points of their teams. Are you content with what they have got here to work with right now?
I feel like for Haru, this is of course going to be a unique pick for him. He didn't play it in the NLC, and he hasn't played it yet in this Amazon European Masters, right? But it just feels like it fits his wheelhouse. You know, the Headgrims, the backline divers, the Volibears, the Dianas. He likes to get up close and personal with any AP or AD carry in the backline of the enemy team and absolutely destroy them. And it also fits his playstyle. He likes to play aggressive. This guy likes to die to get his team ahead. I think Nocturne is perfect for dying by getting your team ahead.
For me, I'm going to disagree slightly because I think it fits half the play style, where you get to a certain break point and you play aggressively. But this is a losing jungle matchup early on. So Haru cannot afford to be overextending, caught out, and you know, this guy does die first quite a lot in a lot of his games. So there is something to be said about Haru having the go button, having the ability to make those big plays. He's done that as kind of like a leadership, shot-calling figure for the team in terms of those bigger team fights. But if things don't go well enough early for him on the first 2 clears, maybe we'll see some issues there. However, that hasn't really been what Yike has been specialized on the other side. As we said, Yike is an incredible jungler when he gets to play defensively and set up his lanes to success and get them through to a point where they can start popping off at 2-item team fights and the like of that. I wonder if Yike can play a bit more aggressively and punish the winning early jungle matchup that which he has, whether we'll start to see Haru falling apart.
All right, Mr. Physicist, I see the thesis you're positing there. Got a second here as well, while we're waiting on 1 or 2 tech issues just in the back end before we get onto the Rift. To talk a little bit about a wider picture here as well, because we were talking in the green room, you were doing a little bit of research on some of the numbers between the NLC and the
Not on
LFL
any
as a whole.
physics-related matter.
No, nothing actual physics-related. We weren't talking about, you know, the maths behind the game. The spaghetti code is beyond even Chimera, which I'm sure.
You know there is a thing called spaghettification.
I did.
Yeah.
Isn't that when you go, like, super close to black holes?
Yes, you get
Okay.
turned into spaghetti.
There you go. Fun fact of the day. I wasn't necessarily going there, but hey, now we are. Let's bring it back towards this one briefly. LFL versus
League of
NLC.
Legends.
Yeah!
LFL versus NLC. As I understand it, the record since, was it, well, you had your stats
so
down
I somewhere.
somewhere.
looked for this, yes,
you
because
did. I
it
wanna
is,
give it to you.
we kind of gave this overshadowing kind of thing about says like you can't really bet against the LFL very easily. That's because they've won so many of their tournaments. But actually thinking about their adversaries within the ERLs, the NLC actually has a very close head-to-head with them ever since Carmine Core started winning, you know, that last year. So ever since 2021, the record is NLC 12 and LFL 14. So what that means, and you can keep track of this at home as well, if this is a 3-1 to X7, head-to-head between the two regions over the last 2 years, it is straight up tied. If they 3-0, NLC takes the head-to-head. Now, I don't think many people would have had that on the radar. I actually didn't until I started looking. I was thinking, well, LFL have won so many tournaments. They have more teams, obviously, and, you know, there are some caveats to it. But still, just in terms of playing the numbers game...
because they had more teams. They hadn't played against a lot of NLC.
That's it.
We've cracked the code. We have cracked the code.
Fantastic. Well, I've got good news, everybody. We're going on to the Rift in just under 10 seconds, so get yourselves very excited for our first game of the Amazon EU Masters Playoffs. LDLC versus X7 coming to you live. And we are here for this level 1. Are we expecting anything particularly exciting at this mark? Or is it going to be a stable one?
Okay, so I feel like when you look at the side of X7, it's particularly the Korean duo. It's Tempt versus Haru. It's always been the story of Tempt and Haru versus the world, right? Everyone around them is absolutely stellar, but they are the two that are going to make the difference in the make or break. Kasing right there is going to find DOS and actually hop and skip away onto another Yordle. But the reality of the thing is, when you jump over to LDLC, I feel like it's Yike and DOS. And you talked about how Yike likes to play a little bit more passive in the early game. I looked at like every single jungle path and this guy has done. It's literally been red to full clear to maybe invading Raptors just to see if he can find anyone right there. By minute 4, you also see DOS shadowing wherever Yike is on the map and try to protect him and the mid laner. Whilst if you go onto the other side, Haru would have probably died by minute 4 and tried to get a lane ahead.
He would have killed someone or died trying. But I think that does kind of come into an overarching point, which I think LDLC do very well. I mean, LFL early games in general for me been a little bit suspect. It's a lot of skirmishing for skirmishing's sake. Whereas you look at LDLC and how Yike does do this quite formulaic pattern, but does manage to stay close to mid lane in a lot of these games. And DOS will roam up and cover other parts of it. When you're playing around picks like the Veigar, like an Orianna, like you were talking about earlier on as well, when you've got these more scaling teamfight picks, just allows them to just get onto the radar in a much more safe manner. And when Sam was talking about, are we expecting to see anything early? Not when you're playing that well defensively.
Yeah, exactly. And if you look in the mid lane right now, so what we talked about with Yike is like he will start on one side and full clear towards the other and maybe try to invade just to get some information. Haru is just very aggressive in the early game. And since Yike has a very predictable pathing and you know that he's most likely going to be going towards the top side because they might pull a dive onto the Ornn, Haru is doing the exact opposite, knowing that he has so much priority in the mid lane with the Vex shoving into the Veigar as well. So I'm wondering right here, and this is the question mark that I want to leave to us, but also the viewers watching, is Haru going to take a more aggressive approach, knowing exactly how
I see how
Yike
it
wants
is.
to play
You're
the
right.
game?
You're crowdsourcing our analysis. You can actually answer this at home.
Incredible.
Maybe shout at us on various social medias.
Of your choice.
Press 1 on your controls right now.
There's a throwback. Not quite the early thousands of noughties. We use smartphones these days as DOS. Does land a pretty good grand entrance. The Ignite comes down as well. They are actually going pretty hard on this, but it's just a summon event and a bit of a health bar lead.
Well, so that was actually a sick hop off from Kasing at the moonshot from the Calibrum. And then that Nata didn't take that extra long-range auto attack from the rifle of Exakick. And Kasing just making sure that that summoner investment from LDLC isn't actually getting that much pressure in lane. You see this a lot against GB lanes. Burn the Ignite early, try and get them back in lane.
But the most important thing is that I think they're stuck in the waves down the bot lane, so they could also be looking for a dive towards the bot side of the map, especially since the Ignite was used. And there is no other combat summoner onto the affiliates because the Exakick has gone for the cleanse to be able to get out of any fear. You see how Haru is hovering towards the bot side of the map. Unfortunately, the wave is not in a state to dive bot side. And everything is gonna go as planned so far for Yike.
At this point, but you look at this and you see the knock, then you're like, look, you aren't realistically looking for early plays yourself. You're actually doing, again, well, as we said, Yike is what Yike has been more successful at in terms of just shielding your lane, shadowing them, seeing what can happen in those areas. And Tempt was hugging that bot side of the river. Bot was safe to push in. X7 just getting through the first 2 clears and making sure that they're in a relatively safe scenario.
Absolutely, and well, we've got this little bit of a break in the game, nothing too exciting happening. It's worth talking a little bit about Haru, as he has been right up there with Yike as someone who's been absolutely phenomenal.
So, one of these stats is not like the others, because you see all of the stats are like, wow, crazy damage, fantastic gold difference amongst all the junglers. Wait, what the heck? That first blood death percentage is how many times he dies first in the game. That's a lot, especially for a team which is coming out who has qualified from these groups. Isn't going to be like a 0-6 team. Haru has been on the bad end of early games fairly often.
But you said it, it's either get ahead or die trying. And he's gonna continuously keep dying to get his team ahead. And honestly, it's worked. In the NLC, it has worked. He will make this very over-aggressive, proactive plays, I would say. But when his team is there to back him up, and especially with the synergy that he has with Tempt, it actually shows how they can get ahead by even Haru dying. Now, of course, playing on the Nocturne, you're trying to farm as fast as possible to get that level 6, get the lights down, and then try to pull off a dive.
So, you talked quite a lot about going in towards Raptor invades, and then DOS coming up to help with that as well. I mean, a ward was just put down to Raptors, and look, that's a Xin
what do you see?
trying to get toward that popcorn chicken. Haru going to drive it into the brush, but he doesn't have a support coming to
Look
help
at
him
where
right
DOS
now.
is.
Yeah, DOS is finding a very long wrap around there, and Yike is right on top of these Raptors. They're going to go in onto Haru. Does have the spell shield, so they'll get a fear off onto Yike as well. Fight over the Raptors, and that's about it for now.
But Haru can chase them because if you look on the map, Nata and Kasing are actually moving up.
Be here. They throw down the Event Horizon in the mid lane to try and zone off Temper. This is a dangerous position. DOS has to flash over the wall. Not what they wanted out of that invade.
And that was because the Rakan kind of goes for a 2-step play, and in the second step, you don't have your cooldown, especially not at this point in the game. You're only level 3, very long basic ability cooldowns when you haven't got that many ranks into them, and suddenly that's a tool taken away from one of the big playmakers early game for LDLC.
And praise production as well. That spectator bug has been fixed. We have actually got CS numbers now as well. Not everyone missing CS for 5 minutes in the game. So you can now see roughly where our players are at. As there is actually another good grand entrance to the bot side. Leads to an exhaust, but Nata's in trouble. Trying to go down. Flash out, still goes down. And that's a massive first blood from the bot side of LDLC, and Kasing now being run down. Root from the Binding Eclipse. Exakick will not be able to quite secure it, and DOS actually takes a tower shot. Can't secure the double.
And you know, this is something we started to see a little bit more out of X7 in the second round. Robin, where actually their 2v2 was not all sunshine and rainbows. Nata and Kasing just getting caught a little bit too far forward without Rakan W.
And again, you're fighting into a wave that's going to shove into you one way or another. I feel like there's a little bit of an overextension by Nata and Kasing right there. But what's the most important thing for both of these junglers right now is that bot lane is completely summoner-less. And you will have very soon a level 6 Nocturne onto the map
that's
that
a
can
good point.
very easily dive towards the bot side of the map.
And again, there's multiple phases to these plays. And maybe against Rakan without Flash, you thought maybe you just shouldn't die there. But of course, they end up... at least at that point, they do get all 4 summoners. That is now a big target on bot side. I thought it would potentially be going towards top side. You can see that the Aatrox has had wave push for most of the game. It hasn't led to too many advantages. I thought that this is going to be more of a top side centric draft from X7, but when you have that opening, it makes sense to try and take advantage of it.
Fun little story here as well, because of course, Kasing got knocked out of the EU Masters in last year, of course, when against Misfits Premier in the quarterfinals. But before that,
I
the last
cast the
time
game. I remember it quite vividly.
but the time before that he got knocked out would be all the way back in spring 2020, where he was knocked out on BTXL by none other than LDLC.
Oh,
So going down there in the bot side, of course he didn't, but his AD carry did. It's a little bit of a throwback to that, which is probably not what he wants to be remembering right now.
And, so there's a little bit of history, maybe some extra stakes to put on the table and say, okay, well, Kasing wants to go further beyond once again, get later into the stages of this tournament, but giving up an early kill like that in the TVT, not what they wanted on them.
Level 6 onto Haru, very crucial right here. Pathing towards both sides, he's going to clear his wolves, head towards that red buff probably, and then maybe try to pull in a dive. Because look at the wave right now. Exakic's wave is building up, which means he's going to shove in. And by the time it does, look at the Korean doing the mid lane tempt and Haru moving in as one.
Another thing to point out is there is currently no teleport up there. That's completely off center. Either way, but you can see that it's in the same kind of vicinity. No teleport on the Ornn. It's somewhere in the vicinity.
Look to the right of the circle.
Ragnar doesn't have the teleport. It's hard to do that versus the Nocturne anyway. You have to be very quick in reactions to collect that summoner spell before the lights go completely down. But there is one on Jaeger, so difference in not just semi-globals and those ultimates, but also the summoner spells bringing people to the fight.
8 minutes has crested about 45 seconds ago, which means Yike is taking the opportunity right now to start up the early Herald, and that's a pretty big deal. It's a CS discrepancy for Haru, which has led to him getting a significant solo advantage, which is something he likes to go towards, and he has got that paranoia to burn at some point, but it does look like that will be the Herald secure, but now Yike needs to think about getting out of here.
Might just go
They're going to go straight in on that. Massive damage coming through. Jaeger's going to try and secure a kill onto the back end, as Ragnar's been left out to dry. Can maybe fat flash the wall, does so. Jaeger following up, trying to get the last auto down. It's going to be bloody close, but he does manage to secure it. Yike in over the back end of this, and he does get the turnaround kill. Flash forward from Haru, who's going to get that one back. It's a 2-for-1 in favor of X7.
It's a 2-for-1, and what this also does is give a lot of gold to that top side. Again, this is something which we pointed out very early into the game, saying, hang on, what happens if you get these early kills over towards that top side of the map? Doesn't this get difficult for LDLC to defend against those tower dives later? But still, gets damn close.
Does indeed. Either way, it will be, at least for now, a win for X7. They've still got the Herald to LDLC, but this was a very aggressive play from Haru to go straight onto Yike.
And Yike is grabbing the Rift Herald right there, probably going to put it down to Aphelios, but we mentioned Haru is great at farming, great at being ahead at 15 at very early into the game. He's one level up, so he's instantly going to engage onto the Zinzao. They get double flashes from the top side of the map as well. Jaeger cashes in on a kill, Haru cashes in on another kill, but the most important thing right here is if you look on your screens, there's an entire wave shoving underneath Ragnar's tower, which he's going to miss. That's a lot of CS, a lot of gold, a lot of experience that this Ornn is going to be down.
And guess who was at the start of that play, though? We talked about the Aatrox being the beneficiary, but the engine starts with the ignition from Haru. It's that ultimate, he farms up to it. It's not earlier into the game, like the level 3, level 4 mark, which you've sometimes seen from this player, but still gets himself on the board early.
Of course, that Paranoia now on cooldown alongside the World Ender. Probably about 30-40 seconds left on that one, but there is a Dragon alive, and Nate is going to run into DOS. They throw down the final chapter, so can't quite secure that kill, though. It'll be the ultimate down, but DOS has to burn the quickness to get far enough away from the chasing Jinx.
But every time you blow a big ability like that, the ultimate, you blow a flash like we saw earlier onto that Raptor Pit, makes it harder to shut out the Jinx Yumi from the game. And while we have seen that one kill go over, and we've seen a CS lead go over to the side of the Aphelios and the Rakan, it's not really something you want to be depriving yourself of resources to deal with in the next few minutes.
And again, if you look on your screens right now, 77 CS to Haru, 72 for the side of Yike, but Haru also has his Raptors up, he has his Wolves up, and he has his Gromp up. And what he can very easily do is walk towards the top side of the map, potentially maybe even pull another dive onto that Ornn, deprive him completely of what he needs to be in the early game, which is an undiveable rock in the tops of the map, and just give LDLC the first Dragon.
Okay, so we can see that they're starting up this Dragon, just
look
looking
at
towards
Jaeger.
this
He's
map,
actually
though.
walking down.
But he's actually just managed to shove in, get a ward even onto the enemy Raptors. They're going again.
Going straight, and remember, there is no flash. There's surely no hope. They've thrown down the Crescent Guard. It's not enough. His temp follows up with a Shadow Surge. And the jungler falls again. Superstar for LDLC, getting caught out in the river twice now.
They're just playing it a little slowly, or LDLC. They're trying to play towards again, maybe catching out the 2v2. That was where some good news happened for them. But you still don't have top prior. You still don't have mid prior. Just before this, you pointed out, Trouble, that Jaeger walks in towards that top side jungle and then walk back down towards that Dragon. Well, yeah, LDLC don't have the ability to stop X7 turning up at the right place at the right time.
And look at the levels again. Level 9 for Haru, level 8 for Yike. He has his entire side spawned as well, so he's gonna go towards there and clear that one up. And again, every time you have an Aatrox that is really strong, you have to be looking for this top side possible plays. But let's look at this one again, because Haru pulls the trigger on his own yet again. And he does that because that big cooldown was blown out of the Rakan, which means he cannot get stopped, he cannot get taunted, he cannot get locked down, and he has Vex flying in with him, which is the Haru 10 special.
And you still don't have your solo laners there to respond. Speaking of those solo laners, though, Aker is going to get a cash injection from that Herald. That's going to be the sunk cost of that, but it still is only 2 plates. It's not taking down that mid lane turret. How much is this realistically going to mean? Getting gold on your Veigar can help. That's why maybe DOS is looking to put the hurt on a little more.
Indeed, I was about to comment on the gold lean being only 200 or so in favor of X7, so really not a big difference in this game, despite a few plays in a row going X7's way. It's still a very close game. Do a fair amount of damage back with that shadow. Well, it's not the shadow surge, of course. It's the personal space and the lightning.
Yeah,
Throw down the rocket.
More.
Oh! Not as a sniper.
As a sniper, a whole lot of high caliber weaponry. That's a big kill to pick up. Of course, that's actually is that actually going to be an assist over to Vex too? That's pretty well picked up.
I feel like the second this Cade's missed, possibly LDLC should have walked off.
Just call it off.
You see Yike on the top side of the map. He's just walking out. DOS overextends a little bit too much right there, and he gets hit by the E. Nata, the sniper right there, takes out the rocket, throws it towards the mid lane, finds his target as well. And mind you, this is a Jinx that has been deprived of a lot of gold.
Boom.
Died 2v2 in the lane as well. So Nata really needed that influx of gold going into his pocket.
We already talked about that CS lead a little earlier for the Aphelios. We can actually see the Kraken Slayer built up by Nata. And if you are sat there as a Xin Zhao or a Ornn or a Rakan that has found themselves a little bit too deep behind enemy lines, that Jinx is going to be doing serious damage.
And you know what Haru really needed? An additional item in the name of Yuumi. It's TFT all over again. Look at the gold discrepancy there in the jungle. Add in a Yuumi and all the additional utility she offers to a diving champion like this Nocturne. And you should start to feel a little bit nervous for LDLC right now.
And speaking of that Yuumi, it's a Yuumi that has actually at this point survived the laning phase. We had a few worries about it, of course we did, in terms of that first kill being given over, the CS lead, but now it's not just the Nocturne which can benefit from this, it's the Aatrox who is ahead of their lane opponent, who is pushing in continually, who is getting themselves to a really, really strong point in power. This Yuumi has many options to go forward with.
I'll call it out. We praise LDLC for their stable early games and their incredible team fighting. They are so good if they can get to that point in the game. They're not that far behind.
No,
You've got Exit Kick in a position where he could do some damage, especially if he can get to another half item, full item. But they need to be able to stall over the next 5 minutes, and we're way past that 10-minute mark, and they seem to have done pretty well right now. I put that pin down, and never mind talking to you, because they're going straight in mid lane. Can't quite secure it, though. LDLC just get Haru. They blow him up with the Primordial Burst, and they're going to get 2 here. Make it 3. They overdive.
Absolute disaster for X7. Haru and Tent are going in alone yet again, thinking because they have the cat on them, they can actually win this fight. But the buttons are there. The taunt is there from DOS. It's very powerful. Yike's ultimate as well, which keeps him safe for so long. And it's unfortunately for X7 fans an absolute disaster. LDLC walk away with 3 and the second Rift Herald.
And so much goes wrong there, because it's not just the mid lane play, it's bot lane. It's the crescendum on the Aphelios, which allows you to absolutely shred through the turrets. And you know what happened in that mid lane play, going back to that? It's the jungle and the support coming to help that lane. We know this is what LDLC do. It's one of the things they are absolutely incredible. And well, this looks like a very fun, aggressive play at first. You're diving into a flash on the Veigar, who still has their ultimate available, and the jungle support helped them bridge that gap in the gold and the power which X7 had at that point.
They don't get the burst.
I feel like the combo right there onto the Veigar could have been a little bit better. The fear into potentially the Yuumi lockdown could have been better to like get rid of the Veigar really quickly and then turn it into a 3 versus 2. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Aika managed to flash away, and it is now a 2-0-1 Veigar sitting in the mid lane with Everfrost and a needlessly large rod.
And actually,
this is going to hurt massively, because if you look on the side of X7, they're all squishies.
But also look at those Moke Treads. Next time you go for that CC combo, try and overlap it, you are going to eat a Veigar roll. They are going to be able to escape a part of that CC and probably return fire with a QR. Ragnar, though,
did take a lot of damage. Needs to think about getting out of it. Goes unstoppable to time out the horror, but it's not going to be enough. They just get the kill, and now the rest of the fight comes in. Crashing Guard is down. Here comes the rest of X7. Aka is on a killing spree, though. Nata in a difficult position, flashes over the wall. Dos follows, but I don't think he wants it. Look at Haru on the other side. He's a 2v1, and it should surely be a trade. Goes golden, does Dos, but I'm not sure that stopwatch buys enough time. It is a 2-for-2, all saying said and done. Yiga flashing forward. The World Ender is down, but he gets slowed by Yike over the wall with that Umbral Chains. Gets in, keeps pulling them back. So much damage with the Darkin Blade. Shut down goes the way of Jaeger.
And you know what? We've seen some pretty fine performances out of Jaeger on a regional level, but I thought he might end up being one of the weaknesses for X7 at this tournament. That has absolutely not been the case. Finally shows up to one of these bigger fights, gets a kill for it.
I just really hope we get this replay because Yike pulled a sick play onto Kasing, ulting him while he was transitioning from one champion to another. This is going to be the Vega teleport. Ika is coming in, no flash, no ultimate. X7 are gonna get the Jinx excited, gonna get the Dragon, get the F out. But the most important thing is that every time X7 are pulling the trigger for a play like this, Exakick is all alone in the side lane, banking in on these kills. They're going in.
Oh, they get the ult. They won't be able to follow it up, though. And Exakick might use this opportunity, though, having interrupted the reset to try and get on this mid lane tower. Haru's in a lot of trouble, gets knocked up and taken out with a dark matter. Mid lane turret falls well. That is now 3 turrets unanswered by X7. LDLC continuing to extend the gold lead here.
So why did we say that it's important for X7 to win out on this early game? Why is it important to get these early kills? Because LDLC, when you hit the mid game, pull off stunts like this. They've taken 2 outer turrets on the sidelines, and he's trying to TP away. But you can see how difficult it is for X7 to play these side lanes now, and LDLC looking to punish.
Can't knock him up, can't interrupt, and Jaeger gets out, but the TP is burned. We'll get that replay you asked for. Let's watch that little interaction.
We have to watch this replay because even though there's like 4 members versus 1, Ragnar isn't on and he survives long enough. Keep your eyes on Yike because the second Kasing is going to leave Haru to jump onto Tempt. He gets instantly ulted away by Yike. That was such a beautiful play, which means that all the buffs that you get from the Yuumi and all the heals, Kasing could not use for a few seconds as he's locked out of attaching to anyone.
But while this is, you know, we talk about the mechanical plays in this one again, it is fair to say this is still close. There's 2 deaths on the side of X7, and this is without that Aphelios, who has now solo taken 2 towers and side lanes. As soon as X-Kick starts turning up, as much as this is a lot of eye candy for X7, just kind of pulling out some of these edge case scenarios, as soon as that Aphelios is there, it is a much harder job to do that.
Absolutely is, and I think it is probably worth highlighting that mid laner from LDLC. Tempt and Aka have been so critical to their teams, but Aka right now on this Veigar looking absolutely dominant. But we're going to bring it up. We can't even talk about it because they're going straight in on the jungler. Yike goes down again. They'll call out the Forge God, but it goes wide now. Ragnar in a very difficult position will get to back away.
Watch Tempt because he has a really nice flank angle. He could have also hit the R onto Exakick or Ika, but I think here X7 learned from past mistakes. They take the first engage, take 1 member down, back out. That's what they need to do. Grab some vision, take what's given to you, and then back out. They keep feeding kills into Jaeger, and later on, that Aatrox with the Yuumi could be completely unstoppable.
Potentially could be, but still got to get through that Aphelios, and in that fight had the Severum, had the Infernum, big ultimate turnaround damage, and you pull that Moonlight Vigil of those different flavorings. And again, we know X7 are a team that do overdive. We know that LDLC are very handily able to handle these diving comps. You don't win that 1v2, don't go for it. Maybe with Akers there, you can try a little more boldly. But if X7 have been overdiving in LDLC,
they're in trouble. Gonna have to get out of here. That's the quickness. It's a double jump into the event horizon, and down goes Jinx alongside the Yuumi. 2 are dead, Baron's alive, and LDLC are right on top of it.
And these are the mistakes that made X7 lose back-to-back games to Kamakop and not take the first seed. You're walking into no vision at all as ADC with your Yuumi. You're gonna end up going down. Let's see if X7 can pull this off.
You've got Paranoia, you've got Shadow Surge, you've got a World Ender popped in. Ragnar's going into the pit to stay alive, but they missed the Shadow Surge, but Wait still goes down to Baron. Now they need to try and play this one out. It is a 2v4. Paranoia is popped. The Baron has been stopped at 3k HP. Haru on the blast cone, off of vision.
Jinx ult available.
Get in here.
Jinx
ult is available. There's a flash for Haru as well. He would be able to get in. He gets into the back of the bed. It will be a smite, but it is still going to be Yike that wins it out. They get the kill as well. LDLC now getting out 6 kills onto this Veigar now as well.
It was 50 HP in it. Gets damn close once again, but This is kind of just on Nada. You don't have safety to be here. You don't have Paranoid even off cooldown at this point, nor would they even have been in range to do that. This is just very aggressively pushing into the river with none of that support. Don't have that flash. Big overstep from Nata, which LDLC pounced on, and this is LDLC's mid-game. This is the point where we thought, yeah, they're a bit difficult to deal with when they are in a advantageous spot when they do get to that point in the game. And though Jaeger is strong, though you have... That's such an execute. I was about to say, that's an execute. Normally you assume that execute involves some kind of missing HP.
No,
that was still
whole health bar.
most of the HP bar still in place.
I was 6% HP or something and he disappears. And of course, it's all up to Haru and Tempt again to try and get that still, and the rocket was coming in but was blocked by DOS. But all in all, LDLC are taking every single inch that's given to them and they're completely running away with it. Now it's so difficult to defend, they have to pull Jaeger back from the top side of the map. It's definitely going to be one inhibitor going down. The other waves have been pushed away by both Jaeger and Tempt.
They're actually keeping Jaeger up there for now, trying to find something. They don't have those objective bounties unlocked to them. They have 2 dragons, which of course makes it harder for them to get to that point, but LDLC crushing through the map.
Absolutely, and from an early game where we had a Fed Nocturne who was ahead in levels against the Jins, at one misplayed mid-game dive, and the snowball back from LDLC has been nothing apart from exceptional. They are now up near enough 6,000 gold. They've got Baron to work with still. They've not taken this dragon, but they can stop the soul point coming through, and I feel like this is their game to lose from this point. Look at that Veigar!
There's a few questionable choices that I'm seeing on the map right now. For example, Haru trying to shadow Nata pushing in the mid-wave, but like you have 5 Baroned up minions on the both side of the map trying to take your entire base. You need to back at some point.
And you do, but the problem is, how do you deal with this 5-man unit? You can't dive into them. They have too much gold. They got the Baron. They got everyone there ready and waiting
Cage
for
is
them.
down.
Cage is down. I still don't think that's enough because you get Q and ulted onto your knockdown onto the first diver. They die immediately. I think the X7 just need to weather out this storm. It doesn't matter how much of your base you lose as long as the Nexus is alive.
Here we go.
They're going for it.
But they're going to think about it. Shadow Surge goes wide though, and now Jaeger's in trouble. Flashes away, gets charmed up, but actually healing up pretty well right now. Big damage back, he's still alive, but Yike will surely secure that kill. And now the flashes forwards come through. X7 trying to turn us around. It's a good final chapter, but they can't kill anybody. Temp goes in for a fear, but will not get the kill. Stopwatch is in, but still they're alive. It's a double back for Temp, but they can't quite secure the kill. Exakick does not go down. Kasing is left to fall as well, and just like that, it's a game to LDLC.
And it's a fight too far. You see the 5-man unit. It was always gonna be a tough ask.
Just like that, we have got our Game 1 victors. LDLC weathered the early storm and snowballed the mid-game in extraordinary fashion.
And I felt like all of our expectations, everything that we fed into this game came out to be true. Haru, a little bit over-aggressive. Nata and Sing, we mentioned that a few times. There's a few whoopsies that are going to be punished. But when you're playing against the LFL first seed that are looking to scale into the late game, capitalize on your own mistakes, and then close out the game cleanly, you see what the problem is right here. And X7 might have to reconsider how far they want to play with that aggression.
Dangerous game to give up, that one.
Huge stuff from then. But alas, we have got to toss to a break. The LFL champions strike first in this best of 5. After the break, we'll break it down how they did it. See you in a few.
The systems are overloading. We can't risk another game.
We need to take a break and regroup.
We're starting to lose our mind. Captain, we cannot go back to Elo Hell. Last time it took us months to get out of it.
Initiate break protocol.
Hurry up! Yes! Yes! I did it! We did it! We did it!
Even the big